also the continuing generosity of your people. I'm going to anoint the organ with olive oil and then pray for it. Let's pray. Father, I pray for your anointing to fall upon whoever is playing this organ. Father, and may it be to your glory. Father, we remember all the people that have sat behind this organ and played it over the years. What a blessing it's been to the church. And Father, I know it's been a blessing to you. May that blessing continue. May your light always shine upon this organ, upon this church, and upon this people. And Father, we give you thanks, we give you glory, we give you honor. And we praise you in the name of Jesus. Amen.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this special rededication service for the Trinity Church organ. For this celebration of the organ, I'm going to give you a little background about the history of the organ. What I'm about to read comes directly from the history books produced for the Trinity Church 25th, 50th, 75th, and 100th anniversary celebrations. In 1917, 3 years after the church was built, the first pipe organ was installed. It is not the one you see here. It was a Moller pipe organ manufactured in Hagerstown, Maryland, by one of the oldest organ builders in the country. Of course, I guess it wouldn't be that old if you think, well, anyway. This organ cost $1,200, of which $600 was given as a charitable gift by the late Mr. Andrew Carnegie and the Carnegie Foundation. The balance was provided by the Young People's League of Trinity Church, as well as members and friends of the church. On January 28, 1918, the pipe organ was dedicated. But due to the fact that there was no electricity in Hudson at that time, they were unable to install an electric organ. Many young men can well remember the time they put in pumping the bellows which furnished the power of the organ. Do you think you'd really want to come to church early on that day if you was a kid? Probably make Dad have a flat tire. There was a large wooden pump handle in the balcony that was used to pump the air for the organ. In the early days, older boys and young men were recruited before worship services could begin to go up in the organ loft and pump the organ during the service. Henry Dorman, Fernando Krankenberg, Richard Spangenberg, Leonard Ockel, Chet Bauer, Al Brenzing, and the Heisemeyer boys were some of the young men who were drafted to lend a hand. The organ arrangement was different than we see it today. The organist was in the balcony. The keyboard was along the south wall in the middle, and she faced south. She could not see the pastor, so therefore she had a large mirror to watch the minister in front. Then came the installation of an electric motor. Then considerable more time elapsed, and as every other useful thing is improved and made more perfect, so it is with the organ. That first organ served for about 23 years. Then at the annual meeting on December 26, 1938, because the first organ had failed to give service for several of those years, the board was instructed and authorized to do something about it. Nothing specific was stated except that they must find a way to finance whatever they did. The old organ had to give place to another, with the latest improvements modern engineers could build. After a thorough investigation, they found the Moller organ was very outstanding, and on August 5th, 1939, another Moller organ was purchased. This is the organ that you currently see at the front of the sanctuary. This organ, a two-manual electric unified, was the latest and most up-to-date organ that can be bought. When completed, it cost $3,500. The console was placed in the main auditorium and is connected to the chamber, which is in the balcony by cable. The chamber, which encloses the pipes, is airtight to protect them from dust and sudden atmospheric changes. This was done to lengthen the life of perfect tones and mechanism for a great many years. M.P. Moller's patent electro-pneumatic action was used in this instrument. The materials throughout are the best. All contacts were made of phosphor bronze and pure silver coupler contacts in the keyboard, which do not. All wire was of the best grade, properly insulated, and specially built cables, asbestos treated and approved for fire underwriters, and all 300 electrical connections were soldered. As a side note, incidentally, these soldered electrical connections were part of the reason the updated needed to happen. More on that later. I have a few props. I've sat in this church several years and tripped over a little piece of wood that runs along that side and never knew what it was. You change out an organ, you learn that's where the wires and a air pipe run. There was this thing in there, which this is the specially treated wires. And I've opened up one of them, and you can't tell where you are, but there is a lot of wires in each one of them bundles. That single wire, this is a solder block in that day. That single wire come in one end, and a whole bunch of little holes are drilled in there, and it comes in, and it's soldered on a peg, and then it comes out the other side, and that's what goes to each one of them pipes. And the organ mechanic, he can explain that better than I can, but I never saw this until this was going down. They're each numbered, not color-coded, numbered. Then came, wait a minute, I'm on the wrong page. Moller manufactures and voices all pipes used in their organs, thereby assuring a most artistic and beautiful tone, prompt in speech and free of imperfections. As it was written in 1939, Trinity Church is justly proud of the new organ, not only for the intrinsic value, but the church leaders at the time felt that it will do much for the well-being and the truer fellowship within the church. In 1939, the church leaders and musicians would probably have never guessed that that organ would still be in use and would be in great shape 80 plus years later. When the new pipe organ was installed in 1939, Bertha Hitz Schaefer served as the first organist on that instrument. But in the next 30-some years, many others have served. Among them were Mrs. O.H. Zwilling, Hildegard Spangenberg Waite, Pearl Okel, Mrs. D.H. Moritz, Johanna Bauer Carpenter, Naomi Anderson Bauer, Mrs. Ernest Okel, and others, whose names could not be recalled. During 1947, a set of chimes and 2 additional stops were installed on the organ. Bertha Hitz Stargel and Naomi Anderson Bauer served as the primary organist for the church for the first 40 or so years of this organ's life. They also were the piano organ teachers in the community for numerous students. Occasionally their number of pupils were small, but usually there was a good supply. The organ piano students that stepped in and shared their musical talents included Petty Spangenberg Bauer, Ron Spangenberg, Richard Payne, Mary Lou Bauer, Tom Bauer, Dennis Sifkes, Patsy Witt, Marjorie Hallman, Jeanette Hallman, Virginia Hallman, Maxine Sillen, Shirley Schaefer, Judith Sillen, Connie Taylor, Elaine Brenzing, Judine Drock, Joanne Brenzing, Terry Teichman, Jane Maherter, Leah Dunn, Brenda Bauer, and Arlene Van Galder Williams, as well as others whose names could not be recalled. As part of this special organ rededication, we want to pay tribute to the history and heritage of this organ and the people who played it. So let's start with Naomi Bauer. Naomi Bauer was a longtime church organist who also gave piano and organ lessons for 55 years to students in this area of Hudson. She not only guided, trained, and developed numerous students to play the piano, she also gave birth to two incredibly talented musicians, Tom and Mary Lou. We are so glad to have her son Tom and son-in-law Carl joining us today for this celebration, and we have asked Tom to give a brief tribute to his mother and the legacy she left behind. We are so glad to have her son Tom and son-in-law Carl joining us today for this celebration, and we have asked Tom to give a brief tribute to his mother and the legacy she left behind.
I know many of you, can you hear me? I know many of you, but I don't know all of you. I'm Tom Bauer. Naomi Bauer's my mother. She's deceased. Mary Lou Martin Bauer, my sister. She's also gone. First, I want to acknowledge Mrs. Carol Erickson. She is a keyboard, organist, and piano instructor from Barton County Community College who has agreed to join us here today and to participate in this program. Thank you for being here, Carol. This is my church. I was born in Hudson. I was baptized here in 1942 by Reverend Paul Casper. And even though I live in Great Bend, this is my church. I'm going to use this now. This church cornerstone was laid in 1914, and according to the Constitution of December 26, 1921, the Constitution of the Church of 1921, this church was named the German Evangelical Trinity Congregation. Ernest Anderson and his family, which included my mother, Naomi Anderson Bauer, moved to Hudson in 1922 when she was 9 years old. At that time, her mother, Nettie DeSelms Anderson from Stafford County. Mother and dad both graduated from Hudson High School in 1929 and went on to college at Emporia, where they both reached what was determined to be a lifetime degree in teaching elementary school. They married in 1936. My sister, Mary Lou, was born in 1938, and I was born in 1941. Mother taught piano at home and at organ in this church. After the organ was installed, at age 7 in 1948, I had no alternative but to study keyboard, although not really willingly. I was no Mozart. I believe that Mother and Mrs. Bertha Stargell were the primary organ teachers in Trinity Church at that time. Mrs. Stargell was also the wonderful choir director. My first organ teacher was Jerry Ray Witt, a Hudson High School graduate, who taught in the home of his parents, Hermie and Kate Witt, in St. John, also being strong supporters of this church in its early days. Perhaps the most important things, however, most important organ music my mother taught me here was, on this organ, was U.S. Bach's 8 Little Preludes and Fugues, which I loved when I was in high school. My mother's major contributions to this community and to this church We're teaching in country schools, including music, teaching piano in our home with those darn recitals, teaching organ and serving occasionally as church organist here in this sacred sanctuary where her spirit remains to this time.
Thank you, Tom. So let's also mention that Naomi's daughter, Mary Lou Martin, is one of the many talented Hudson musicians who learned to play on this organ. However, she is one of the few who pursued higher education training in music, specifically earning her bachelor's and master's degree in organ performance. It is pretty remarkable that this organ sitting in the corner inspired Mary Lou, who then inspired and taught music to multitudes. Think about the ripple effect. Here to give a tribute to Mary Lou is her husband, Dr. Carl Martin. Just as you know, Carl and Mary Lou were married in this very church 60 years and 3 days ago. And this organ was a big part of their special day. Did she have to play during the ceremony? Yeah? Welcome back to Trinity, Carl, and thank you for all the time researching and connecting the many people who have ties to Hudson and this organ. Carl.
I'm Carl Martin, and I am so grateful for the opportunity to be here. And I have some friends in Winfield that have made bets as to whether I would be in this church with my red bandana mask. So that's why I'm here having a little fun with this, because I have good friends who are in the medical field say this is not a very effective, healthy mask. It is a joy to be here today, and I want to give a little bit of background for those of you who may not know. Mary Lou graduated from Hudson. At that point, she was already an organist. She had studied organ here. Jerry Witt, who was a student at Bethany College, was her teacher during the summer. And so Jerry was not too much older than Mary Lou, but he was the one who started her. So that Mary Lou spent hours at this organ, hours practicing, and it was possible for her to become, later on in her life, a very talented and gifted organ. And so as Mary Lou came to the end of her life, I had the opportunity to have a friend join me as Mary Lou reminisced about her life. And one of the things that came out was she narrated that it was this organ and this church was so important because it was a way in which she was no longer being taught by her mother, who was the piano teacher. So a significant thing happened. There was a liberation. Mary Lou was no longer the student of her mother. She was her own artist in her own way, and there was a significant, this is pretty deep in terms of psychological things, but it was a very important moment for her. And so when Mary Lou was talking to me and my friend about what happened here, she said, when I got to the organ, I felt like I was dancing. And that's what she did. She was young when she started to learn the organ, so she had the agility and the ability to start using her feet in the special way that was necessary. Many people who begin to study organ in college or later on have difficulty with the pedal work. Not Mary Lou. She felt like she was dancing. And the reason that she felt like she was dancing is because hundreds of people had made it possible for her to play on that organ. And I want to give credit and honor to those people. I want you to think about 1938. I want you to think about what happened in the 10 years before that. The stock market crashed. 3 or 4 years in which there were very few crops in Kansas, very few crops in Hudson. And yet, after those kind of 10 years, a group of people in Hudson said, I think we need to have a new organ. They found the money, and they funded it, and they transformed many lives. And I'm here to say to you and to all of the people of Hudson, thank you, because you brought many moments of excellence and beauty into my life because of Mary Lou and because of this church and what this organ means. May God bless us.
Thank you, Carl, for sharing those thoughts and stories. Given the influence of Naomi's Thank you, Carl, for sharing those thoughts and stories. Thank you.
Formed many lives, and I'm here to say to you and to all of the people of Hudson, thank you, because you brought many moments of excellence and beauty into my life because of Mary Lou and because of this church and what this organ means. May God bless us.
Thank you, Carl, for sharing those thoughts and stories. Given the influence of Naomi's presence as a piano teacher, it is only fitting that August Sifkes plays a special music piece on the organ. You see, August's dad, John, and her grandfather, Dennis, along with her aunts and great uncle, were all piano students of Naomi Bauer. 15-year-old August is an exceptional pianist as well, and now plays for church services too. Today, we asked her to make a debut performance on the organ manuals. She will be playing a song titled, That Grace May Abound. Thank you, August. Moving on to recognize Bertha Stargell, who was born in the late 1800s. Bertha spent majority of her life teaching piano and organ. She had an amazing number of students, and it has been fun to hear so many stories from these students. We've asked Richard Payne to give a tribute to Bertha. Richard?
People that she brought in. Carl, talking about Mary Lou and how she liked to play with those pedals. Bertha always told everyone I was the only student she ever had that played barefooted. I had a terrible time when I first started learning the piano, that organ, and I had size 11 shoes. And one night when I was practicing, I took off my shoes and it worked great. And so from then on, I always wore loafers so that when I got up to the organ, I could slip out of them and play in my stocking feet. And Brad, you can understand that, you being an organist. Bertha got her musical training in Bethany College in Lindsborg and taught for I don't know how many years. I couldn't find that out, but anyhow, she was not only the organist here along with Neoma, but was the choir director, not only for the adult choir, but for the junior choir. And then she had many special things. I remember bringing in a harpist one time and other people that she brought in to make services special and brought in, and we had, she had recitals. She had so many students that it took 2 nights to do the recitals. And they were always here at the church. And she would have, I think it was Mayfield Music, and Hutchison would bring in like 4 pianos. And she had picked all this music and had these students trained, but I can remember playing when there were 4 of us, or 8 of us, playing on 4 pianos, and we all ended up at the same time, so she had done a good job. But it was just a special experience to be an organist here at this church, and I want to thank all of you for continuing to keep the organ functioning and improved, because it's, to me, was a holy instrument. It's a magnificent instrument. The things that, the sounds you can make, you can really feel like you were praising God, particularly when at the end, when you were playing the postlude, and boy, you could hit that crescendo pedal and really roll out things here in the church and make it sound. But I know it was probably a tough thing back in those days when they first put it in. I know for a lot of you now that the music has changed. The guitars and drums and this type of thing is the type of music, we call it contemporary music. But I hope that you'll always keep using the organ in your services, whether it's the entire service or whether it's an offertory or a prelude or whatever it is. I hope that you'll keep using it. I did want to preface my remarks. If you think that I was trying to overdress, when I started playing, I was 14 years old. I started taking lessons at 13. When I started playing at 14, it was in the summer, and there was no air conditioning. And we would open that window just a little bit to get some air in here. But Bertha's code was coat and tie. And so I'm deferring to her today by wearing a coat and tie here, whatever. But they have already named, and I appreciate that. I spent several days here calling Judith Sillen and Connie Taylor or Hathaway, and we were trying to go through the names, and he's got names that we couldn't think of. So, but the reason I started was Jerry Witt encouraged me to start taking lessons. I was about 13. And about a month or two later, Ron Spankenberg started taking lessons. And then it just continued. It was Maxine had already started, Maxine Sullivan had already started. Shirley was already taking lessons. Ramona Taylor had started taking lessons. And it really got to a point where there was a problem in scheduling lessons and scheduling practice sessions. And my time was 7 o'clock in the morning. And so I'd come over and practice at 7 o'clock, and there were other people, and of course, Neoma and Bertha were giving lessons too after school to a lot of people. So it was quite a thing. And one day Bertha said, could you practice in the evening? Yeah, I said, well, Maxine doesn't want to be in the church at night. It just makes her nervous. And I thought, oh, that's just like a girl, you know. I mean, So I came over here and I was practicing at night. Well, it so happened the junior choir was also wearing white robes at that time, long robes. And a couple of them were hanging back there in the back, I guess. But Leo Krankenberg passed away. And Gene Krankenberg was one of my teammates in football and basketball. And we were all struck by this. And Bertha told me, she said, you know, you're probably going to have to play for a funeral one of these days. She said, I want to give you some music, and you start practicing so when that happens, you'll be prepared. Well, it was the evening of the funeral, after the funeral. And in those days, we didn't do memorials so much. It was flowers. I mean, there were flowers all over the front of the sanctuary here. And I come over there, and I'm practicing this music. When I came in, it was still light. And we had a little lamp that were on the top of the organ that we used to light up your music. And it kept getting a little darker and a little darker, and I'm playing, practicing, and doom, 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 you know, kind of dreary. And all of a sudden, I heard a noise in the back. And by now, I didn't realize it had gotten dark outside, and it was really dark. And I looked back, and I saw those two robes. And if you've ever seen anybody jump from a sitting position, I was real, and I thought, you know, maybe Maxine was a lot smarter than I thought she was. But from then on, when I came over to practice at night, I turned on the foyer light, so that wasn't too sure. But another time, the mother's room here, the door went all the way through. And I was practicing or playing in church, and at the end, we had a little thing that all the people sang, and then I was supposed to go through and play the second part. I think it was Henry Dorman was one of the ushers, and he opened the door. And that window was open, and my pages blew shut. And I was trying to hold that chord and find those pages. But what I didn't, when I got ready, got back, found the page, I just put my other hand down on the grate, or the thing where the music was loud for the hymn. And there was this boop, 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 boop. And on Monday when I came to practice, there were clothespins over here on the end of this thing. Bertha decided maybe we better clip our music so we didn't have those problems in the future. What really stands out, though, is what has happened. All these people, Virginia Hallman was one of the first students, I think, and Virginia ended up playing for First Presbyterian Church. She was the organist of First Presbyterian Church in Hutchinson for years. Jerry Witt ended up being a music director and organist for a Catholic church there in La Jolla, California. Ron Spankenberg ended up being the organist for Grace Presbyterian in Wichita. Let's see here, who else do we have? For me, it was a great experience for me because when I went into the service, I ended up in Germany. And while I was there in Germany, they told me one day I was supposed to go see the chaplain. And this was shortly after the Udall tornado. And I thought, I wonder if something's happened to Hudson. Well, the colonel that I worked in finance, he knew that I played, and they had lost their organist. He was coming back to the States. And the chaplain said they would like for me to audition. And we went upstairs into the loft, and it was a Hammond organ. And for you people, a Hammond organ is a totally different instrument from the pipe organ and the electric organs I played on, because I also played at Peace Church occasionally. And but fortunately for me, Bertha had one in her home, and I had learned to play on it. And so we went up. It's a little toggle switch that you have to push to get the motor turning, and then you turn it on. Well, I think they had somebody else that was probably a better organist, but he couldn't turn it on. He kept putting it in, and it wouldn't come on. And so I pull these. You have these little things you pull out, and you have some things like a key over on the other side. And I could make it up that I could play a hymn. So I played a couple of hymns for him. And the next day he told me I was their organist. And I started in 2 weeks. I wrote home quickly to the parents and said, send my organ music. And I got it on a Monday. And I went over Monday night and started practicing in the chapel. And I was at the 5th Division headquarters in Augsburg, Germany. And this is where the generals and colonels and everybody came to church. Well, I practiced the hymns and everything, and then I changed the stuff around, the registration and so forth, and practiced the prelude and practiced the offertory. Tuesday night I went back and practiced again, and it finally occurred to me, on a pipe organ, and even electric organs, we have little buttons underneath the keyboards that are called pistons. Some of them are preset, and on the organ here you can set them yourselves. You push in the button and you push the stops that you want, or tilting tablets or whatever. The Hammond organ didn't have any of those. And I got to thinking, what am I going to do? I mean, if I'm playing an offertory, which is real, you're playing a little softer, how am I going to change all this to play the doxology afterwards? And I looked for a manual, there wasn't a manual, and I was trying everything, I couldn't do anything. And by Wednesday night, I was in a panic and praying very diligently. And Thursday morning, I got a phone call from Munich. We had a branch office in Munich. And it was Bertha Stargell. She was in Munich with her daughter Shirley and with Pearl Okel. And they had been traveling in Europe and visiting some distant relatives and so forth, and she just wondered if it'd be possible to see me. I said, Bertha, get up here to Augsburg, please. So she called back in about an hour. She said, could you meet us Saturday at 11:30? I said, I'll be there. And I went into the colonel and told him I had to be at the depot at 11:30. He said, well, we don't close till 12. And I told him the situation. He said, you better be there. This is a God thing. And it was a God thing. I wanted to take him out to lunch. Well, they wanted to know if I could take him somewhere where they could get a cheeseburger and some French fries and a Coke. And I said, RPX is just perfect. And so we went there. And then Bertha spent the entire Saturday afternoon showing me how to do these different things and writing out on a notepad practically a manual that I could use from there on. And he helped me get ready for the next day, Sunday morning. Well, I went in Sunday morning and played. Didn't have a problem. But when I came down from the loft, the chaplain was standing there, and he said, wow, Payne, he said, you really are an experienced organist, aren't you? And I said, you wouldn't have thought so 24 hours ago, sir. So, but this was a thing, and I just made a note here. Just because of that, I played there, and then when I was in a fraternity at K-State, after I got out of the service, I played for weddings in Albert, Kansas, Blue Rapids, Kansas, Bennington, Kansas, Kansas City, Kansas. Then I became the organist at Wesleyan Presbyterian in Emporia, and I substituted at First Methodist Church in McPherson and First Presbyterian in McPherson. And it was just a part of my life. And that, Jennifer, I hope that you'll encourage your students of all the opportunities that they have. The sad part for me is they lost their organist at Trinity here last fall. And I was approached about playing. And so I went over and started to practice and was shocked to find out I can't play anymore. I have arthritis, and after 2 weeks, I could play Amazing Grace and I could play Silent Night, and I just decided that the congregation was going to get tired of singing those two songs every Sunday. So, but I thank you for all the other things. Okay. Sorry to take so much time. Oh, just one more thing. I wanted to give all of my music to Jennifer and for the church. And some of it's a little ratty, but I hope that I know it'll be used well.
As you can see, the influence runs pretty deep with the students that were within the community. To honor Bertha's long-term commitment to teaching classical piano and organ, 9-year-old Ryer Ward will now play Bach's Minuet in G. Thank you, Ryer. In 1986, there was a new trumpet stop installed on the organ, and there is a plaque on the organ console that indicates the trumpet stop was dedicated in the memory of Mrs. Bertha Stargell. And it leaves a legacy that all will know, and from her students. As it turns out, benevolence and generosity, especially towards this organ, runs in the Witts family as well. His first cousin, once removed, Greg Lewis, sadly passed away the day the organ console was removed from the church last February. A couple weeks later, Greg's family designated a special memorial donation to the organ fund to assist with the second phase of the upgrade project, replacing the antique air blower in the basement with a modern and smaller blower in the pipe organ room. This generous contribution added more momentum to the organ project and allowed us to make all the necessary upgrades at one time. Thank you to the Lewis family for this contribution. Greg was very active, longtime member of Trinity Church, where he served many roles in its leadership. There is a plaque on the organ that commemorates your kind gift for this phase of the organ upgrade. Therefore, it is only fitting that Greg's young grandsons perform the next two songs today. First up, we'll have 8-year-old Kenyon Barney, who will play When the Saints. Thank you, Kenyon. And next up, we'll have 10-year-old DJ Barty, and he will be playing two songs. The first one is Do Lord, and the second one is Fur Elise.
Thank you, Kenyon, for that. He'd wanted to play for Elise, and I'd often told him that's not a song that can be played very well on the organ. So you'll notice in his program, it is arranged by Barney, and that's exactly what he did. He was able to arrange that song to make it sound really good on the organ, so thank you for doing that. After Bertha and Naomi retired from playing at the church, then the church responsibility went to Peggy Bauer. And in fact, Peggy played faithfully for over 40 years here at Trinity Community Church, and then went on for another 13 plus years to play at a church in Ellenwood. I always thought of this, because she was the organist when I was growing up, I always thought of this as Peggy's organ. And I would tell her that, and she said, no, it's Naomi's organ. I guess it's all a matter of perspective. So she taught several students, but I do believe I was one of the last ones that she taught to play the organ. And I had a lot of thoughts here that she did teach me a lot about not only service play, how to accompany a congregation, how to make them go faster when they're dragging you down. And that's a true story. They do drag you down. She just had an amazing gift at being able to create registrations on this organ when there wasn't very many to pick from. We only had 6 memory pistons. Now, she would be impressed. We have over 360 different memory pistons that we can use. She would have loved that because she had so many great registration settings. She never wanted any recognition, never wanted any big fanfare, but serving for 40 years, we kind of thought that she needed something. Unfortunately, we never got to give her this fanfare while she was still alive, but today, would like to recognize for the 4 decades of working in this church. I was always impressed that her and Dean could communicate so well together. Peggy would be here. Dean sat on that back row right in front of the pipe organs, the pipes up there, and they could communicate when something wasn't going wrong. And it made me laugh when I walked in the pipe organ room not long ago that there is a sock still in the pipe organ room that Dean would stuff in a pipe if it got stuck. And so knowing that Peggy wouldn't want a real big recognition, I did make a plaque, though, for her that kind of reminds us of the story of the pipe organ room sock, and that her husband would take care of those pesky, annoying different sounds that could come out of there. So yes, Peggy was my first organ instructor. I've had a couple more since then. One of them I'm lucky to have here with me today. Thank you, Carol, for coming. She has taught me organ for 18 years, and I plan to continue because there's a lot of repertoire and a lot of things to continue working on. Peggy was my first, so I wrote a song for her, but it was because of Carol that gave me the inspiration and kind of the assignment to create an organ trio with some of my piano students. So now I will present to you this organ trio. It's on Praise the Lord, the Almighty. It features 2 of my young 4th grade students. Calla Foote will be on the swell, that's the top keyboard. Lainey Peterson will be on the grate, that's the bottom keyboard. And then I'll take the pedal line because their legs don't quite reach the pedals quite yet. So enjoy.
Thank you, ladies. The organ has been kept in great condition with normal maintenance, just like everything else, by an organ tuner based in Colorado Springs in Colorado. In 2004, the organ pedal board was rebuilt. Until now, that was the only significant repairs in 35 years. It has provided many years of rich music. But in 2020, when we decided to replace the carpet in the sanctuary, I guess the snowball kept rolling, and we thought with the installer we can just surely lift it, and he can carpet under it and set it back down. Turns out you can't really lift the organ because it had air that came this way, and then wires went that way, and so we talked to Chris Harris, who was our organ tuner and our engineer, and asked him, first, can we just pick it up? And that was no. And so we decided it was time for an upgrade. And the options were either to unsolder and resolder, if you remember that board, take out all those wires, and then try to put them back or upgrade it. This is the size of the wire that is the upgrade. 6 strands. I think that's right. Oh, 8. Can't count. And we made arrangements with him, and we removed the console on February 17th. He took it back with him to Denver, and I remember before he took it, I said, does he really know what he's doing? I mean, has he done one of these before? And Jennifer kept saying, he knows what he's doing. And I said, can you ask him? Because we kind of want it back. Well, then the COVID thing kind of all happened, and turns out we weren't using the inside of the church anyway. But he was more than capable, and at this time, I want to introduce Chris Harris of Harris Works in Arvada, Colorado, and he has been maintaining and tuning this organ for 23 years. He travels all over the United States and in the middle part, as well as he does organs in Ellenwood, Great Bend, and Dodge City.
Thanks, Scott. He said almost everything I was going to say as introductory statement, so I guess I don't have to introduce myself. So I will just explain what we did here. The original communication from the console to what is really called the organ, most people call this the organ, but that is the organ up there where all the pipes are. This is the console. Originally, the communication came from that big bundle of wires, and every single note that you played there had to have a wire going up, and several relays and gang switches that communicated from here to there what pipe was supposed to play, and it is now replaced by a number of circuit boards that, like he said, communicate over 8 wires. It's called multiplexing. They send signals in a different way, and upstairs it is demultiplexed, and the pipes are told what to play. What else should I explain? I didn't say very much there. Oh, the new blower, yes. The old blower, which is still down in the basement, was very old, and part of the issue with it, in addition to not knowing how much longer it would last, is that the wind, if you go out on the front step here, you see a galvanized pipe about this big around, and so the air actually, to play the organ, is drawn from the basement and actually spends a moment outside, basically. So in the middle of winter, middle of summer, you've got crazy temperature things going on, and the pipes are very sensitive to temperature. When it's warm and humid, the pipes go sharp, and when it's cold, they go flat. So that exacerbated that. So hopefully now, since the air is all being drawn from within here, in addition to just being more dependable, it'll stabilize the tuning some. What else? Oh, yes, yeah. I probably should have prepared something. Yes, there we go. These are 2 knobs that were added in that are part of the new system. The one on the left obviously is transposer, and the one on the right is memory level. So the transposer, if you're playing with another instrumentalist or a singer who only plays in a certain key, or can't play the key the music you're written is in, the music is written in, you can simply click this knob left or right, and it'll go up or down half step at a time, so that you don't have to learn to read the music in another key suddenly. Memory level, this has 8 memory levels, which means underneath each keyboard are a series of thumb pistons that will bring on combinations of stops that you have set, and you can quickly change through them. And this switch multiplies that. If you just looked at it, there are 10, do you know how many pistons off the top of your head? 12, 22, there are about 30 pistons, roughly. But so instead of 30 pistons, you really have 240 pistons, because each one of those levels of memory adds to that. So you can have 8 different organists, or, yeah, 8 different songs, yeah, and you can reset them anytime quickly and easily that you want. Any other slide I need to explain? Is there more? Oh, yeah. Tag team. Another thing with the new system is internally it speaks MIDI, which stands for Musical Instrument Digital Interface. It's probably like a 40 or 50-year-old protocol now that allows different instruments to be played digitally, basically, by a stored program or such. But also, this keyboard, as well as most keyboards, speak MIDI, and so now, with some further programming that we need to explore, you could play any voice that piano has from the organ, and you could play the organ from that piano, if need be. For instance, like you're going to play Dance of the Sugar Plum Fairies, and you need a chrysoglot to play that dingy bell noise. You could have it come out of there while you're playing the organ at the same time with a little programming. So just an added fancy feature of the new technology. So, all right. I just wanted to say, I should have realized, because I think this project for sure is the fastest I ever proposed something and heard back, yes, we're doing it. I think it was like 24 hours. And I should have realized how significant this instrument is to this community. But hearing all these stories and all the threads that wind together, it's really amazing. And I'm glad that it remains a part and is going to for generations yet. So, all right, thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Also, when he came here, I think it was Friday or Saturday, he was going to fine-tune it before we had the rededication and recital. The air conditioner system kicked on the church. His fine-tuned ear said, "What is that noise? That's a G." So I need him to diagnose my car.
Yeah, I also wanted to say this man typically is a legend that we would say, you're going to tune the organ, we open it up, he comes in, he does his thing, and he leaves, and you never spend a lot of time with him. But through this project, we've really gotten to know Chris, and he is a craftsman. He is just a real genius at programming, at woodwork, at all these things. So we really appreciate all that you've done, Chris, for this organ. And I probably need to add a thank you to Scott, too. He spent hours tearing stuff out, going through everything, and when he married me 17 years ago right here, he probably had no idea he'd be crawling through the crevices and the nooks and crannies of this church. But thank you for all of your help too. We're going to try to roll through this a little bit quicker now too. I did want to make a couple comments that we have had amazing organists and musicians that have come forward, especially when we saw the void that Peggy left when she went to Ellenwood. And so we just want to thank everybody who has played a part. We had a church director, we had some pictures taken, but we didn't get everybody. But Connie Hathaway is one of the other organists. I also play the organ. We've got Dennis Siefkes, Terry Dwarf, Norma Blakesley, they all kind of chipped in after 2005 when we needed more help playing. Kim Davidson, who played earlier this morning with me, she came along board, and then August Siefkes has recently started playing for church too. So for being a really small community in Hudson, a really small church, we've been blessed with amazing musicians. We also have a 9 o'clock service, and they've found musicians and pianists to play at that as well. So Chris Lee started that service about 4 years ago, and since then Kim Wolf and Barb Roth have also stepped up. So we've been very lucky. As the current organist, and I could tell stories, if you hang around after lunch, we can all tell a lot of organ stories, but it is pretty amazing to get to play this instrument, and it's not just playing. It's something far more special than that. So I was going to say more, but it is a very touching instrument to play, and things happen that you really don't have any control over it, and so you know somebody else is kind of involved pushing those buttons, getting those notes to hit the right notes so that people hear the right thing. And I know I haven't hit all right notes, but I hope that they've been blended in for the people. And I see Brad shaking his head too. There are times when stuff happens in a service that you can't even predict, and it's beyond anything we could have ever done. So one of the things that put it most into perspective for me was a quote from Kelsey Grammer, who said, "Praying is when you talk to God. Meditating is when God talks to you, but playing the piano is when you do both at the same time." And if you just extrapolate that to the organ, where you have full body coordinating worship, it's a pretty amazing experience. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that my charge to the future musicians is I hope that you have that experience. I hope that you get to serve the Lord through music. I hope you get to use your God-given talents to do that, because it's more than just sitting there playing. It's a true worship experience. One other quote Bach says pretty well is, "I play the notes as they're written, but it is God who makes the music." And that pretty well sums it up. I have that above my organ at home, so that I remember even if I play a few wrong notes, it's all a joyful noise to the Lord. So I guess one thing that I'd like to talk to future musicians about is that this isn't Naomi's organ. It's not Peggy's organ. And it's, maybe some have thought of it as my organ. It's really not my organ either. It's our organ, and it's the Lord's organ. And I just am excited that we can have this opportunity to play and to have an instrument that is so fine to do that. So at this point in time, one of my favorite all-time songs is Ode to Joy, and it's a great song for young musicians to learn. So I'm going to let you guys take part in a medley of Ode to Joy. So if I could get our 4 musicians up here. We've got Liddy Axman. She has been taking lessons for about 2.5 months. She's in the 2nd grade. And then I've got 3 out of the St. John 4th grade class that are taking lessons as well. So we've got Califoot, Ryer Ward, and Lainey Peterson. So they are going to be playing a medley. It's a great song, a great tune to get in your head. And I think by the end of this song, you'll probably be in your head as well. So as they slide off the bench, feel free to give them applause, and we will just continue on with this service. this dedication story, then there's one piece that we haven't covered, and that's the foresight and the generosity of all the people in this church and community. These updates and upgrades actually cost considerably more money than the original cost of this instrument. Granted, there would be inflation. But the forefathers are smart enough to put together money, set aside money in the organ fund, knowing that someday there would be future repairs that needed to be done. I don't know exactly when it started, but I did look in records in 1955, and at that point there was $455 in the organ fund account. We've been watching this grow, and ever since I've been a member of the church, the annual meeting reports how much is in that organ fund. And the one thing that was neat is I've looked at this for 20 years going, I wonder what we're going to spend that money on. Now we know it needed to have some updates. But the nice thing about it is that there was money set aside for this. While it didn't cover the full amount, it was enough to know that we could proceed right away within 24 hours, and we could give a bid or give an indication back that we could proceed with this project. So we've had a long list of people who have contributed to this organ fund, and I'm going to get Scott to go around the corner. We've had a long list of people, family members, that have memorialized their loved ones by giving money to this, and then we've also had a group of people in 2020 that gave a little special contribution to make this happen as well. And so Chris Harris and all of his artistic abilities came up with a memorial plaque that represents, and it does kind of fit in with all of our other decor here, but this is a memorial plaque made for all of those people, and they're listed in your program that you can also come up at some point to see this on the plaque. A lot of generosity. We also saw, even though we hadn't planned at the time, there was an untimely and sad loss of Greg, and he was able to also move us ahead in this project, knowing that there was going to be probably two phases to this. We were able to proceed on with both phases at the same time, so really maximize the time and energy put into this particular upgrade. So thank you to all the people that have donated. Thank you for the people that have thought about this. We just really appreciate it. Thank you for all those who provided service. And one last shout out was thank you to Carl Martin, who was kind of my first encourager, the first person I called when this organ project came on, because I knew I need some encouragement. He's continuously been an encourager for this program. Worked with Tom Bauer, and he was the one who gave great ideas for how we could do this particular service today. So I know we're running short on time. Lunch is supposed to be at 12:30. We will head to that here in a little bit. And we do have an organ recital at 2 o'clock that we'll have to get back for as well. So at this point, Scott, if you'll say the prayer, and then we will lead on to the last few things.
Let's quick pray. Heavenly Father, this instrument is yours, and we dedicate it to you. Raise up and inspire the musicians you will use to glorify your kingdom, and bless the ears for all to hear. The good news as it travels in musical sound waves. And we thank you for the blessing of Trinity. In your holy name we pray. Amen. As we head into our closing hymn, a couple quick announcements. As she said, there is lunch. We are splitting the group into two, and some of you will be eating in the basement of the church, and some of you are eating up at the community hall. I believe those going to the hall, you already know that. Yeah. Okay. And then after they play our closing hymn, feel free to go that way. Just keep in mind, let's try not to congregate too tight, social distance and all that. And those that are going downstairs for the meal, if you need the elevator, you can ride the elevator or exit through this door and down the stairs to go down there. And there's tables spread out, and people will be filling your plate and handing it, setting it on the counter for you to take. So with that, let's have our last song. Well, I'm sorry.